What entranced me about Gone Home back in the day was the sense of being an intruder. In the almost decade since, first-person narrative adventures have taken on some weird and wonderful dimensions. As in What Remains of Edith Finch and Call of the Sea, but they tend to hit a little differently. Martha is Dead flirts with a speculative vibe thanks to its spooky fairytale framing. But it remains grounded firmly in the reality of its World War II setting. If the rest of Martha is Dead matches up to the opening chapters played for this hands-on preview, it could well become the new benchmark for walking simulators. Authenticity is the biggest strength of Martha is Dead. Developer LKA's dedication to detail is evident in everything from the recreation of the Tuscan backdrop to the machines you interact with, not to mention the emotional complexity of the story. The game's title gives away the narrative hook. Martha is dead, drowned in a lake, but her identical twin sister Julia is the only one who knows. Everyone else thinks that she is Martha. In the fluster of the moment of discovery, Julia is unable to correct her mother's assumption, and the burden of what the secret means makes speaking up increasingly daunting. The circumstances prey on Julia's fragile mental state. It manifests in her narration and more viscerally in disturbing nightmare sequences that capture the abstracted realism of dreams. Whilst I'm unable to delve into specific plot points, what I will say is that certain story moments really caught me by surprise and I developed a lot of empathy for Martha's unfolding situation. Her life is pretty much changed forever following this horrific incident, and I'm really interested to see how she learns to cope with this new set of circumstances as the game progresses. The only criticism I have with regards to the narrative is that some sequences are just shown through scrolling sequences of text. This is perhaps in an effort to free up some more of the budget. But even something as small as a still image would have captured my attention better. I also have to admit that this will not be a game that will suit everybody. The dialogue here is purely in Italian. It's apparently the first indie game to use it as a native language, and with it being so story-focused, it means you'll have to be patient and do a lot of reading. Then there's its story content. The game is set during a particularly sensitive time during world history, and some may find the overarching theme of losing a family member to hit a little too close to home. This is by no means a shortcoming, but I cannot say it's the most accessible. Martha is Dead plays a lot like a horror walking simulator with some bits of interaction thrown in here and there. I wish there was a bit more freedom to walk around and explore, especially given the beauty of the Tuscany countryside, but I can understand why LKA designed the game this way. The focus and immersion comes from Julia's perspective and her love of photography. And in fact, the camera is very important to moving the narrative forward. There are no puzzles in the traditional sense. Instead, you'll find yourself thrown into interactive mazes of a sort. There are two puzzles within Martha is Dead. You'll have to focus on objects through the lens of your camera in order to take the snapshot, or you'll be in the middle of the forest, having to correctly piece together a sequence of words and phrases to advance. While the photo puzzles are fairly easy, the word one is a bit more complicated. Guess the wrong word or phrase and you'll have to start from square one. It can be a bit frustrating at times as these words and phrases come up very quickly, however. They do become easier the more you've completed. That said, part of what makes these sequences frustrating is the awkward camera movement. This is an issue throughout, but it's more of a minor nuisance until these sequences. The controls aren't super smooth, so I found quite often that moving around can be a bit of a pain. Which of course, isn't exactly what you hope for when playing a game that really focuses on walking and looking around. Additionally, the load times between chapters and even between cutscenes aren't as quick as they should be. There was one time when I left my computer, made myself a cup of tea, came back, and the next scene was just coming into focus. So between the two chapters, it took almost 3 full minutes to load. This doesn't exactly lend to the immersive experience the rest of the game tries so hard for. But, as there is still a month before the full release of Martha is Dead, I'm hopeful these mechanics are ironed out for a more seamless feel. One area that still fails to engage is that of the running nightmares. The nightmares themselves are fantastic works of surrealism, terror, and guilt. They make you shiver with their obscurity and strangeness, which is also where the body horror and gore was mostly found in the demo. But the interactive sections where you have to run through claustrophobic but bewildering corridors are far less appealing. In the demo, we had to choose the route that spells out some phrase of self-loathing or supernatural threat. Other times, we had to awkwardly dive and duck under fallen trees. And neither made the hairs on the back of our necks stand up. With the stellar sound design and crisp visuals that deserve much more attention than this preview can afford to give them, these sections just don't hit home like the other scary moments. Although saying that, one of the biggest disappointments we met in the demo was one of the central characters and antagonists in Martha is Dead. The game looks so good. But the Lady of the Lake, or at least the first time you encounter this ghostly visage, is less gripping. As she darts and dances between the trees surrounding the lake, she looks just a little too solid, too angular, too bright to be a true horror. Like many horror games, the monster isn't nearly as scary as the things you imagine watching you just out of sight.